Dahlia pressed her back against the rusted hull of the abandoned freighter, her heart drumming so fiercely it felt like it might burst. Darkness had swallowed the ocean hours ago, and the only light now came from the battered survival flare in her trembling hands. She cursed at herself for waiting so long. Maybe if she'd signaled earlier, a passing ship would have seen her before nightfall. But then again, none had shown up during the day, so what difference did it make? Still, she refused to give in to despair. Clinging to the last vestiges of hope, she raised the flare skyward. A brilliant arc of crimson illuminated the night in a frantic, flickering SOS. It all started with a mission that had gone horribly wrong. Dahlia wasn't a spy, soldier, or anything glamorous like that. She was an independent researcher studying coral bleaching in remote ocean pockets. Her job involved charting the movement of a rare marine algae, and she convinced a local fisherman to take her far beyond the usual tourist waters. She wanted data that no one else had, maps of nutrient exchange beneath the deep. The fisherman had warned her the region was fraught with unsavory elements, pirates, smugglers, and unpredictable weather patterns. She'd laughed off his concerns until the storm rolled in, monstrous gray waves toppling them in minutes. She barely recalled how she made it onto the battered freighter. One moment, the fisherman's boat was capsizing under walls of water. The next, she was flailing in the open ocean, salt water stinging her eyes. Desperation must have guided her, because somehow she ended up clambering onto a half-submerged chain leading to this massive, decommissioned cargo ship. Its original owners had clearly abandoned it long ago. Rust and barnacles covered every surface like a scab. Giant cracks webbed the deck. Cargo crates half-splintered open were scattered about in the hold. Now it was her floating island of sorts, certainly not paradise, but the only lifeline around. She had improvised what she could. An old radio lay in the control cabin, but it spat static no matter how much she jiggled the dials or tried to solder frayed wires back together. Her next best bet had been the emergency flares she discovered in a corroded locker. On top of that, she'd found a single full barrel of diesel, which kept her hopeful about maybe powering some ancient generator. But she had yet to find any workable engine. So day after day, Dahlia was stuck. She rationed her slim store of canned goods. She prayed for a passing vessel. She found no luck. Tonight, though, she sensed a difference in the air. The wind was calmer, and the moon was high, gleaming off the water like polished glass. It felt like a night where fate might shift. She scrambled on the freighter's top deck, her boots skidding on algae-slick metal. Holding the flare above her head, she pressed the ignition again. The second burst of light shot up, dying quickly as it fizzled back into darkness. Her throat felt dry, panic creeping in. That was her last good flare. If no one noticed, she might be stuck out here forever. Just then, she swore she saw a faint beam on the horizon, like a searchlight cutting through the gloom. Perhaps her mind was playing tricks. Eyes narrowing, Dahlia wiped a trail of sweat from her brow. The beam swept once, then disappeared, but a second later it appeared again. She inhaled sharply, adrenaline kicking in. It had to be a ship, or maybe a plane. She scrambled to the corner of the deck, mind racing for the largest piece of debris she could light. She needed a bigger signal. Raising her voice to the starless sky, she let out a hoarse cry for help. She shouted again. Despite the emptiness around her, she kept calling. Then, unbelievably, a distinct, dazzling glare of white light flooded her vantage. Someone was shining a high-power spotlight. She sank to her knees, the weight of relief so heavy tears sprang unbidden to her eyes. She forced herself to remain steady, waving her arms overhead. If only they could see her. If only they'd realize she wasn't just a mirage. A sudden roar tore through the silence, an engine revving, but not from a standard ocean liner. It sounded more like a speedboat. Another beam, sharper, closer. She jumped up, nearly losing her balance as a smaller craft slid alongside the giant hull. Its occupant was a single man, silhouetted against the glare of the spotlight. Relief surged in Dahlia's chest. She didn't care if it was some fisherman or a naval officer. Anyone meant salvation. But as the boat neared, She recognized the distinctly shaved head and steely gaze illuminated in the boat's floodlight. Jason Statham? He was hardly dressed for a glamorous premiere. His face was taut with concern, half squinting at her as the salty spray coated them both. He hollered something she couldn't hear over the roar of the engine, then cut the motor as the boat jostled in the water. Dahlia clutched the edge of the freighter, mind spinning. She had 1,000 questions. Why Jason Statham, of all people? How did he end up out here, in the middle of nowhere? Yet there he was, poised to jump onto the freighter. Whatever the answers might be, Dahlia realized she was no longer alone, and her SOS had, against all odds, been answered. She hurried to secure a rope ladder. Heart still in her throat, she tossed it over the edge, hoping the rusted rungs wouldn't snap. Jason grabbed hold, clambering up with that cat-like grace she'd only seen in his stunts on screen. Once on deck, he took in the corroded environment, the battered crates, the slick floor. For a second, they stood there, panting, salt-laced wind whipping their hair, or in his case, the short stubble on his scalp. Then he turned his intense gaze on her. "You sent an SOS?" he asked in a hushed, gravelly voice. Dahlia almost burst out laughing, but only from sheer shock. "Yes," she managed to say, voice trembling. "Thank you." And right there, as the waves sloshed against the freighter's hull, Dahlia realized she had just stepped into a bizarre new reality, one where the line between real and unreal blurred, and where survival might depend on a man she knew only from movie posters and interviews. In the aftermath of those first electrifying moments, Dahlia took a step back to really see her rescuer. Jason wore a drenched black tee and cargo pants, and he carried himself like he was ready for anything. She didn't know if it was because of his action hero image or the sheer incongruity of it all, but she felt oddly safer. He exuded a confidence that told her he'd done things far more harrowing than boarding a derelict ship at night. However, the confusion still gnawed at her. She had to ask, how are you out here?" she ventured, voice catching in her throat. He glanced up at the dark sky, then back at her, gauging her sincerity. "I was filming nearby," he said, as if that explained everything. "Long story short, got my own boat. Saw the flare. Figured someone was in trouble. Didn't expect to find you all alone on this rust heap." A ripple of gratitude mingled with embarrassment. Dahlia realized how she must look, lips chapped from salt, her hair half a tangle of seaweed. She wondered if he saw the exhaustion etched in every line of her posture. I've been here for days," she managed, blinking back sudden tears. "I didn't think anybody would come." Jason's expression softened. He turned away slightly, scanning the ship. "Let's see if we can find you some help," he said gently. "That outboard on my speedboat isn't exactly built for rescue operations, but it'll do." Dahlia followed, her boots clanking over rusted metal. She felt 1,000 unspoken anxieties swirl in her chest. Part of her wanted to leave this cursed vessel right away, no questions asked. Another part worried about the unknown conditions outside. Pirates? Storms? She'd read the news. Even well-armed merchant ships sometimes fell prey to modern-day marauders. They reached the hatch leading inside. Dahlia had converted a rickety bunk area into her makeshift shelter. The smell of stale air and dampness assaulted them. Her meager possessions lay scattered: a half-torn sleeping bag, some notebooks filled with marine data, the remnants of canned beans she'd rationed. Jason took it all in at a glance, frowning thoughtfully. "We need to go," he said. "I've got bottled water and some emergency supplies on the speedboat. We'll head back to my film crew's base camp. They got a bigger ship that can take you to the mainland." Relief bloomed, but she hesitated. What if the storm comes back? It's a long distance. His eyes flicked to her in that unmistakable Statham manner, a quiet confidence that promised action. "The forecast is clear. Besides, we'll outrun trouble if it appears. Let's get you off this rust bucket." That phrase, rust bucket, brought a rueful grin to Dahlia's lips. She gathered her few belongings, stuffing them into a tattered duffel bag. The ocean air howled through the gaps in the hull, as if urging them to hurry. Together, they picked their way back out onto the deck. By then, the speedboat bobbed relentlessly, rope ladder swaying with each wave. Jason descended first. If Dahlia doubted his heroics, they disappeared the second he reached up to steady the ladder for her. The moment she settled in the boat's passenger seat, she breathed the crisp night air, heart thrumming with a wild sense of deliverance. He fired up the motor, and they lurched forward. High walls of water slapped the speedboat's prow, but Jason handled it with practiced ease, knuckles firm on the wheel. Dahlia clutched the seat, adrenaline dancing in her veins as each swell threatened to toss them. Still, she couldn't shake a bizarre sense of awe. In a single hour, she'd gone from hopeless castaway to sharing a speedboat with Jason Statham. Reality felt like it had splintered, rearranging itself into something surreal. They cut through the darkness, the engine's roar echoing into the star-dappled sky. Dahlia glanced back at the freighter, a dark silhouette now fading into the horizon. She inhaled unsteadily, remembering the terror of those lonely days. Despite that fear, she silently thanked the battered ship for saving her from drowning. For all its disrepair, it had been a sanctuary. Now she was forging ahead with an unexpected guide. After about 30 minutes, a string of lights sparkled along the horizon. A cluster of vessels anchored in calmer waters, each with bright white beacons. Jason slowed the boat, guiding it alongside a mid-sized yacht that dwarfed the speedboat. Before Dahlia knew it, hands reached to assist her up. The yacht's deck was ablaze with floodlights. She squinted, shielding her eyes until they adjusted. A small group of people gathered around them, some in casual clothes, others wearing headsets and carrying clipboards. A woman with short-cropped blonde hair introduced herself as Lucy, the production manager for the film shoot. She offered Dahlia a warm blanket while peppering Jason with questions. Where was the castaway found? How long had she been adrift? Did she need medical attention? The swirl of voices felt overwhelming, but Dahlia latched onto Lucy's kindness. She explained her situation as best she could, how she was an independent researcher, how a storm had destroyed her boat, how she'd ended up on the freighter. The mention of pirates and dangerous waters piqued everyone's interest, but Dahlia's only real run-in had been with that monstrous storm. As soon as Lucy heard about her thirst and hunger, she whisked Dahlia to a lounge area, offering bottled water, sandwiches, and a tower of fresh fruit. Dahlia devoured it gratefully. Jason lingered by the cabin entrance, arms folded over his chest. He didn't say much, but she noticed the glances he directed her way. Concern, maybe? Or curiosity about this stranger who'd been floating in the middle of nowhere. She wasn't sure. Her body trembled as the wave of relief crashed over her. She was safe, warm, and fed. But relief was tempered by the knowledge that her ordeal might not be over. She still had to figure out how to return home, how to salvage her research, how to ensure her data hadn't gone to waste. And she wondered what role this improbable rescuer might play going forward. Was Jason Statham simply going to disappear once she was handed off to proper authorities? He approached her once the commotion settled down, voice quiet. We'll get you back to the mainland. The production has a doctor on staff. He'll check you over. Then tomorrow, we can see about flights out. You have family who can pick you up. Family. The question struck a chord. She had an older sister in Chicago, but calling her home was complicated. Still, she nodded. Yes, I have someone, she said softly. Jason's gaze settled on her. In that moment, Dahlia recognized the sincerity behind those eyes. He might be a star, but in this situation, he was just a concerned human being looking out for another. A fleeting sense of connection formed between them, born of shared crisis rather than glamour. And in that instant, Dahlia's nightmare shifted into a strange, hopeful dawn she never could have predicted. Morning brought a haze of rose-gold sunlight stretching across calm seas. Dahlia stood on the yacht's deck, hugging a steaming cup of tea. She'd half expected the night's events to be a dream, but the smooth hum of the engines and the bustle of production crew around her proved otherwise. Her body still ached from dehydration and fatigue, but after a decent night's sleep, her first restful one in days, she felt more human. She was greeted with an array of well-meaning chaos. The film crew had to relocate further along the coast for their next sequence, some action scene involving helicopter stunts. Meanwhile, Lucy had arranged for a helicopter to pick Dahlia up that very afternoon and fly her to a hospital on the mainland for a proper checkup. In a swirl of logistics, Dahlia tried to keep her sense of self from fracturing. The kindness was overwhelming, but she couldn't shake the worry about her lost research. All that data, weeks of mapping, diving logs, temperature readings, was on the fisherman's destroyed vessel or saved in the waterlogged devices she'd left on the freighter. While Lucy was coordinating with the pilot, Dahlia slipped away to a quieter corner of the yacht, leaning against the rail. The morning sun felt like a gentle hand on her skin. She was alive, safe, and would soon head home, she reminded herself. That was enough. She could always start her research again, right? A voice beside her cut through her thoughts. You look like your mind's a million miles away. She turned to find Jason, hands tucked in his jacket pockets. Even in the bright morning light, there was something understated about his presence. The normal bravado she associated with his on-screen roles wasn't there. He just seemed grounded, concerned. She forced a smile. I'm just thinking about the data. My expedition. That was everything to me for the past few months. She let out a wistful laugh. I had planned to publish a paper, maybe help shape new conservation policies. He nodded, gaze sweeping across the sea. We got some folks with advanced equipment. Underwater drones, cameras, the lot. Part of the film's marine sequences. Maybe we can help salvage something. The offer surprised her. You do that? Not sure we can recover much, but if it's possible, I'll talk to the director. We're filming near reefs anyway. Couldn't hurt to see if any of your gear is still intact, or if the fisherman's boat can be towed up. Her chest tightened at the kindness. She'd been so used to fighting her battles alone that his willingness to help left her almost speechless. After a moment, she found her voice. That would mean so much. Thank you. Jason shrugged, but the corners of his mouth turned up in a rare smile. Gotta kill time between shooting scenes anyway. Before she could respond, Lucy marched over, waving her phone. She gestured for Jason to join a quick meeting with the director. Apologizing to Dahlia, he excused himself. She watched him go, heart oddly light. This turn of events felt more surreal by the minute, but she resolved not to let cynicism or disbelief spoil it. She'd survived a life-threatening ordeal. She deserved to embrace a stroke of good fortune. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of phone calls and preparations. A medic on board gave Dahlia a more thorough examination, stating she seemed dehydrated but not severely ill. He recommended she still visit a hospital for a proper evaluation. Dahlia nodded along, grateful for the relative normalcy. Meanwhile, Lucy filled her in on the helicopter arrival time. Around 2 p.m., give or take. That left a handful of hours to rest, pack, and wonder if the half-formed plan to recover her research was more than a daydream. Shortly before noon, Dahlia found Jason again, this time on the yacht's upper deck. He was in conversation with a man wearing a baseball cap and aviator shades, probably the director. When they finished talking, the man patted Jason's shoulder and departed. Jason caught sight of Dahlia and beckoned her closer. Good news, he said, voice lowered. The director's got a few ROVs, remote-operated vehicles for underwater shooting. We can deploy them to the site of your boat's wreck. See if we can locate any gear. But it won't be for a few days. The schedule's tight. We have to wrap the next sequence first. Dahlia bit her lip. I'm supposed to leave this afternoon. He nodded thoughtfully. Right. Lucy told me. Look, if you stay an extra day or two, we can see if a salvage is doable. If not, you can always head home. But I'll understand if you'd rather just get out of here. You've been through a lot. She stared at him, mind churning. The rational side said, get to safety, recover, forget this ordeal. But the passionate side of her, the one that had spent months gathering painstaking data, roared at her not to abandon the chance of retrieval. She hesitated. I don't want to inconvenience anyone. It's no inconvenience. Trust me, the studio loves good PR. Helping a stranded marine researcher? Perfect. And between you and me, I'm not averse to seeing you get a bit of a win after all you've been through. Warmth spread through Dahlia's chest. She realized that behind this playful mention of good PR, he genuinely wanted to help. Maybe it was the decency that sometimes came with stardom, or maybe just a personal sense of responsibility. Whatever his motivation, Dahlia appreciated the lifeline. "All right," she breathed. "I'll stay. I'll let Lucy know." He cracked the smallest grin. "Good. We'll figure it out." The afternoon soared by. Dahlia canceled her helicopter pickup, reassuring Lucy she'd still go for a medical check soon. The rest of the crew seemed more than happy to have her around, if only out of a sense of hospitality or curiosity about the castaway who ended up in Jason Statham's orbit. By evening, the yacht was docked near a breathtaking stretch of coastline, jungle creeping to the water's edge, rocky cliffs towering beyond. Here, they would film an intense chase scene the next day, utilizing the area's dramatic landscape. A hush fell over the boat as twilight wrapped the world in shades of lavender. Dahlia sat by the stern, letting the soft rocking of the sea soothe her frayed nerves. She closed her eyes. In her mind, she saw the scattered algae samples, the reading logs, the carefully recorded pH levels. She'd come so far in her research. Maybe, with any luck, she'd reclaim that lost part of herself. Footsteps approached, and she opened her eyes to see Jason lowering himself onto the bench beside her. For a minute, they just listened to the sea. "You ever think about what comes next?" he asked quietly, surprising her with the introspective tone. "All the time," she admitted. "But usually my plans don't end up like this." He gave a soft chuckle. Nobody plans for freighters and flares. But sometimes the unexpected leads you somewhere meaningful. She watched his profile in the faint light, pondering how surreal it was to share this moment. "I hope so," she said at last, letting the ocean's gentle hush fill the gaps between them. And for once, Dahlia allowed herself the luxury of optimism, believing that this strange path might lead to a better tomorrow. 3 days later, Dahlia stood on the deck of a smaller research vessel the production crew had arranged for their salvage attempt. Below her, the turquoise waters revealed flickers of coral, bright fish weaving through the reef. The plan was straightforward enough. Use the ROV to locate the sunken remains of the fishing boat, retrieve what they could, and maybe tow the wreckage closer shore if it wasn't too damaged. But Dahlia's nerves were a jangled mess. She'd never expected to come back to the site of her worst nightmare. Jason stood beside her, leaning over the railing. A few of the film crew worked the controls for the ROV from a portable station, screens flickering with underwater footage. The director, initially only lukewarm about the idea, had quickly warmed up when he realized the salvage operation could double as extra B-roll for the movie's behind-the-scenes material. Everyone had a motive, Dahlia supposed, but she was grateful all the same. Sending the drone down, one of the technicians announced through a headset. A faint whir was followed by the sight of a black cylindrical machine disappearing into the depths. On the monitor, murky shapes emerged, submerged rocks, drifting kelp, occasional shoals of fish darting away from the camera lens. Dahlia's stomach clenched as the water's gloom deepened on screen. 10 meters, 15, 20. The tension swelled. Then, the shape of a battered hull came into view. Her breath caught. The remains of the fishing boat lay tilted on the seabed, large cracks scarring the wooden frame. She recognized the paint color, the same chipped turquoise she'd stared at for weeks during her expedition. In moments, the ROV inched closer, revealing twisted nets, shards of plastic, and scattered equipment. Jason glanced at Dahlia, his expression soft with concern. "You okay?" She swallowed hard. "Yeah, just that was my life's work, going down with that boat." He rested a hand lightly on her shoulder. "We'll see what we can save." The ROV operator maneuvered the camera around, searching for anything that looked salvageable. A watertight container, perhaps, or the battered laptop case Dahlia had stowed in the storage compartment. On the screen, a gleam caught the operator's eye. He zeroed in. A metal case, half buried in sediment. Dahlia leaned forward, pressing her lips together. That case held her water samples, her meticulously labeled vials. If water hadn't seeped inside, those samples might still be valid. Another pass of the camera revealed what looked like a waterproof laptop bag. The crew cheered quietly, spurred on by the small victories. It took nearly an hour to hook the ROV's manipulator arm onto the containers and guide them into a salvage net. With painstaking care, they reeled the net back to the surface. Dahlia's heart hammered as the crane operator hoisted it aboard. Salt water dripped from the sopping gear. Without waiting for official clearance, Dahlia rushed to examine the containers. She pried open the case. Inside, the vials were still sealed, labels intact. It was a small miracle. She turned, eyes brimming with tears, to find Jason watching. In that moment, she felt a surge of unfiltered joy. She clutched the damn containers as if they were priceless gems. "They're okay," she whispered. "They're actually okay." Cheers rose from the onlookers, the film crew who'd put in the effort to help a stranger in need. Jason's grin was subtle but genuine. "Worth it, then?" he asked. Dahlia exhaled a shaky laugh. "Absolutely." They salvaged a few other items. A half-ruined laptop bag that might contain some salvageable data on external drives, an underwater camera she'd used for coral documentation. Each discovery felt like a piece of her broken puzzle snapping back in place. True, the boat was beyond saving, but Dahlia knew she could rebuild her research. Maybe even better than before. By late afternoon, the sun hovered low in the sky, turning the horizon golden. The salvage operation wound down, and the smaller vessel headed back to the production yacht. Dahlia spent the ride carefully checking her retrieved items, wiping away salt and grime. She'd know for sure what was saved once she dried and tested everything, but the potential alone lifted her spirits immeasurably. When they finally docked beside the yacht, Dahlia slid her precious cargo into a safe corner of the deck. A wave of exhaustion hit her, the emotional toll of the last few days colliding with physical fatigue. She looked up to see Jason waiting by the gangplank. "Got a minute?" he asked, gesturing toward the lower deck. She nodded, following him past curious crew members who smiled and congratulated her on the recovery. Once they found a quiet spot near some coiled ropes, Jason spoke. "So, you'll be heading back soon, yeah? Now that you've got what you came for." She studied his features, the subtle lines around his eyes. "I guess so. I need to get to a proper lab, see what data can be salvaged. Then I'll figure out the next steps, publishing, maybe returning to the reefs if necessary." He crossed his arms, gaze drifting to the water. "You've been through something intense. Just make sure you don't push yourself too hard, too soon." Dahlia tilted her head, a gentle smile forming. "Is that concern I hear?" He shrugged, feigning nonchalance. "Maybe I'm just used to high-octane stunts. But real life can be a different kind of danger. You can't just yell cut when it all goes wrong." A thoughtful silence stretched. Dahlia reached out, placing a hand on his arm. "I appreciate everything you did. You saved my life. Then you took time to help me salvage my work. I can't repay you for that." He shook his head. "You don't owe me anything. I did what anyone decent would do." She felt her cheeks warm. "Well, decent or not, thank you. I won't forget this." Another hush, thick with something unspoken, draped over them. For a moment, Dahlia wondered if she should invite him to see her lab or keep in touch about the coral reefs. But she banished the thought. He was a movie star with a life full of commitments, scripts, and the next big project. She was a scientist, forging a path in an academic realm that was worlds away from red carpets. Still, maybe there was a middle ground. "Listen," she began tentatively. "If you ever find yourself wanting to know more about marine life, if this experience sparked even a hint of interest, come find me. Maybe I can show you what real ocean exploration is all about beyond the camera." His lips curved into a slight smirk. "I might take you up on that." They stood there for a heartbeat longer, the gulls wheeling overhead, the ocean thrumming beneath them. Dahlia closed her eyes and soaked in the moment. A swirl of gratitude, wonder, and the abiding sense that, despite the trials she'd endured, something bright had taken root in her future. Later that night, as she prepared to disembark onto the helicopter that would finally take her to the mainland, Dahlia glanced back at the production yacht. Jason stood on the upper deck, silhouetted against the lights. He lifted a hand in a farewell gesture. She mirrored it, feeling a pang of something like loss, but also a tiny ember of promise. There were no definitive endings in real life, only transitions. She discovered that the hard way. Inside the chopper, she clutched her salvage samples close. The rotors thundered, lifting her into the sky. Below, the endless ocean glowed under a nearly full moon, as if beckoning her onward. She let out a slow breath, thinking of the improbable sequence of events. The storm, the freighter, that last flare, and Jason Statham's unwavering response to her SOS. The memory warmed her, a testament to resilience, chance, and the power of simple human compassion. The helicopter veered west, carrying Dahlia toward a future she never could have scripted. Yet as the lights of the filming fleet dimmed behind her, she felt no regret. She was a survivor, a scientist, and now a living witness to the extraordinary threads that weave between strangers. And in that quiet hush, she silently thanked the universe for crossing her path with a man who had seen her SOS and chosen to answer it, altering both their lives in ways neither could fully grasp. The end.